Fire Emblem 1 may not be the best Fire Emblem game ever made, but it is almost assuredly the most important, because of course, it inspired all the other Fire Emblem games to come after it. And Intelligent Systems and the fans must like it a decent amount, because it's been re-released 2 more times and even got a sequel. But as with I think most fans, I've never actually gone back and played the original game for the NES. I have played Shadow Dragon, which was the most recent re-release of the first Fire Emblem game for the DS, but I've never actually played the original one. This all changed recently on my channel though, because I've started a series where I plan to Iron Man all the Fire Emblem games chronologically, of course starting with Fire Emblem 1, which I just recently finished. And let me tell you, there are some weird things going on with this game. Some things that would become Fire Emblem mainstays, some things that absolutely would not, some things that they've cleaned up in later installments. But there's a lot to talk about with this game. And I think, as I said, a lot of people simply have never actually gone back and played it. So for this video, what I plan to do, I have come up with 30 of the most interesting facts about Fire Emblem 1 that I could think of, and I want to go through them today. Hopefully this makes an enjoyable experience. I'm just going to say a few caveats here. Number one, there will be some of my opinions throughout this video. Every fact is just that, a fact, but I'll kind of talk about my opinion regarding it or what that means for the game. Number two, basically every fact except for one is gameplay oriented. I may make a video in the future about like the production of the game or the reception of the game, things like that. I think that's interesting, but this is just about pure gameplay stuff. One more thing before we start, I just want to say if you like the content, if you want to see more videos like this that take me a little bit more time to produce, please consider subscribing, liking, maybe leaving a comment. Certainly if you agree, if you don't agree, if you think I missed something, absolutely feel free to let me know. Absolutely feel free to lambast me or call me great, whatever that may be. But yeah, it really helps me out with that sort of stuff and helps me know that this is the kind of content that people are enjoying. But with that, let's get right into it with fact number one. All right, let's start off our list with probably the first thing that you'll notice when you're playing Fire Emblem 1, which is the complete lack of any combat window giving you any kind of information. So normally in Fire Emblem games, when you walk up to an enemy and you hit attack, a combat window will show up. Sometimes even when you're in the combat, depending on the game, it'll tell you the hit percentage, the damage, the crit, all that good stuff. None of that exists in this game. There is a combat window in the combat itself, although there's no numbers. It's just little bars that fill up. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly sort of where your opponent's at and how much damage you're dealing, those sorts of things. But at least that's a little bit of information. But before you initiate the combat, these windows don't exist. Nothing tells you anything. So it's mostly up to the player. Obviously, there are resources that you can find that will tell you weapon weight, weapon hit, all that good stuff. And so it's more up to you. As you progress through the game, you'll probably get a pretty good feel for how much damage your units can take. And obviously, you can still see what your opponents are using and what you're using. So you kind of, again, get a pretty good feel for how much damage is going to happen in a given combat, depending on the unit. But the specifics is going to really be up to the player and using those resources and doing the math themselves to figure out exactly how combats are going to go. Something that you'll also realize very quickly in the game, in fact, probably the first combat that Marth sees, whether he gets attacked or attacks somebody else, you'll realize this, which is the fact that he's just not wearing any pants. I really don't know why. I'm not sure why you would decide to go to war without pants or any kind of armor, you know, on your legs. Doesn't seem very smart to me. He is a pretty fast unit, so maybe it helps out with flexibility, that sort of thing. But for some reason in this game, Marth is pantsless. Fact number 3 is going to be about weapon weight and how it sort of uniquely impacts characters in this game as opposed to a lot of the other games. So in this game, there is no stat like Constitution that helps offset weapon weight. It's not held against your strength, anything like that in some other games. Weapon weight is held directly against your speed. So any character using a iron sword that weighs 2 will get weighed down by 2. They'll get -2 speed in every single combat that they engage in. This means that a lot of characters that struggle with weapon weight in a lot of the other games, Pegasus Knights are probably the one that comes to mind the most. Pegasus Knight in most games have low strength, so they struggle with that in the games where strength offsets weapon weight. They also tend to have really low constitution in the GBA games, for example, which also means that they really struggle with weapon weight. In this game, they are going to get weighed down just as much as a paladin or a cavalier or anything like that. Gender also doesn't affect it. This also means that in this game, weapons that weigh very little are actually really, really strong. In a lot of other games, the difference between an iron sword and an iron lance really doesn't matter because most characters' constitution is enough to just completely offset that weight. In this game, however, it really does matter. For one thing, lances just weigh a lot, so do axes, and swords don't weigh a whole heck of a lot, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But yeah, low weight stuff really matters in this game because it's always being held against your speed, which is unique to this game. The fourth factor we're going to be talking about is weapon crit in this game, and most specifically the fact that there's no way to offset weapon crit. Now, the formula for determining weapon crit in this game is your skill plus your luck divided by 2. Now, that's not that weird. Your skill is always going to impact your crit. I'm not sure if luck impacts crit in every single game, but determining crit in this game is pretty standard. Of course, that is in addition to whatever weapon crit you had. Like a killing edge, of course, is going to have, I think, like base 20%, something along those lines. The big difference in this game is there's no stat to offset weapon crit. So in most games, your luck stat, along with impacting a lot of other stuff, is directly held against the opponent's crit percentage. So most units will just have a little bit of crit all the time, right? Like if I'm using an Iron Lance and I have even reasonable skill, I'll just have like 3 crit, you know? And a lot of enemies in a lot of the games, the morphs in Fire Emblem 7 is a really good example, and the enemies in this game, will just have no luck. So you'll have a little bit of crit all the time. But your units usually have enough luck to the point where, unless an enemy has a lot of skill or is using like a killing edge, they just won't have any crit. This makes playing a lot of the games fairly safe. This game, however, Iron Manning is pretty sketchy because enemies will just have crit all the time. There will almost always be, I shouldn't even say almost, there will always be at least a small amount of crit. As I found out, much to my own dismay, very early in my playthrough, where my Agma got crit by a Pegasus Knight that I really was not expecting. And as you progress through the game, this gets more and more sketchy, as units like snipers in particular get a lot of skill, and silver weapons and the high might in this game, along with low HP and low defense, make engaging with enemies really, really sketchy. And for fact number 5, we're going to be talking about the fact that there is no resistance in this game, or at least no natural resistance, I should say. So there are items that can give characters resistance. Talismans actually give 7 resistance, which is quite a bit. I'll talk about stat boosters a little bit later in effect. But yeah, this is a bunch of resistance. There's also a barrier staff and pure waters that can both give resistance. And the fact that no one has any resistance means that most tomes are pretty weak. So a talisman giving 7 resistance will basically make you immune to most magic throughout the entire game, which is kind of funny. But going back to what I was saying, there is no resistance. Nobody has any resistance. Magic users don't. Non-magic users don't. There's no way to get resistance naturally. No one starts with any resistance. No enemies will ever have any resistance. There just is no resistance in this game, again, unless you're using artificial means. Fact number 6 is about doubling. Now, in most Fire Emblem games, sort of the standard number, I would say, is that you need 4 more speed than your opponent in order to double them. It's not the case in this game. All you need is 1 more speed than your opponent in order to double. Now, I mentioned earlier that because of weapon weight, swords are really strong. And even though this isn't really a fact, more of an opinion, I want to just say that swords are extremely good in this game. In most games, I would say that lances and axes in particular are just simply better because they just deal more damage. But swords in this game are really, really strong. In fact, swords are so strong in this game because an iron sword only weighs 2 as opposed to, let's say, an iron axe that weighs 7, that even your knight on the first chapter, who only has something like 3 base speed, will double all of the pirates on that chapter because they get weighed down by so much. This, again, means that weapons with less weight are way more impactful in this game than they are in most other games. Fact number 7 is really short and sweet. Martha's the only one that can visit villages. If you played Shadow Dragon, they kept this for that game. I believe in Fire Emblem 3 and in the sequel to Shadow Dragon, they also kept this. But yeah, anyone can visit houses, which, like in most Fire Emblem games, just give you little facts about different characters you can recruit, different items, stuff like that. But the actual villages that give you either characters or items can only be visited by Marth. Fact number 8 is about clerics and how to level them up. So in most Fire Emblem games, to level up a cleric, you use their staff, and they usually get experience based off of the strength of the staff. Like Men gives a little bit more than heal, Physic gives a little bit more, stuff like that, right? In this game, you'll find out very quickly your clerics are getting no experience for healing. Nobody gets any experience for using staffs, which is kind of weird. So the question is, can I train clerics, and how do I train clerics? Well, if a cleric survives combat with an enemy, they get the experience equal to basically killing that enemy. Now, it's pretty tedious to train clerics, but honestly, it's not that insane. If you can find a really weak enemy, thieves work really well. You can put them on a fort or have somebody heal behind them and basically get a thief kill every single turn they attack you. But there's not much of a reason to do this because most clerics in this game have extremely low growths. There also is no like siege tomes or anything in this game, so your clerics usually aren't at risk of actually dying as long as you're careful with them. I will say that, again, because there is no magic stat in this game, if you are able to promote a cleric, they will deal a set amount of damage with all magic, because again, there's no resistance. So maybe it has some utility, but just know that if you do want to train clerics, you're going to have to sort of set up and do it yourself rather than just doing it over time by healing. For fact number 9, I want to talk about experience and how much experience you gain per kill. So in most Fire Emblem games, I feel like I'm going to be saying in most Fire Emblem games, so if I wind up saying that for every single one, just be aware. I apologize if it gets annoying, but in most Fire Emblem games, the amount of experience that you get per killing an enemy is determined usually by your level. So like a level 19 promoted unit or pre-promote will get less experience per kill, no matter who they're killing, than let's say a level 1 unit. This is, sometimes you just get a set amount of experience, but for the most part, this is how this works. In this game, however, the amount of experience that you get per killing an enemy is always the same. It will even tell you, let's say you get like 42 experience for killing this thief. No matter what level your character is, no matter what class they are, they will all get 42 experience for killing that thief. It means that training lower level units is just as easy as training higher level units or promoted units. So it honestly means that you should probably just be using your stronger units and not really training up weaker units. There's some other reasons for this in the game as well that I'll talk about later, but for the most part, yeah, that is how experience works. Alright, fact number 10 is going to be about warp and the hammer and staff, and honestly just how busted these are. So the fact, I guess, is that the warp staff exists in the game. It has 7 uses, which is a lot of uses, and it can warp a character anywhere on the map that they want. Hammering is also in the game. Hammering fully restores the use of whatever character the character using it on has equipped. So if you equip a warp staff, you can hammer in the warp staff. That's what this is about. And the hammer and staff has 12 uses. Only Letta can use it, so you do have to keep her alive, but 12 uses is quite a bit. Now, the hammer and staff is sort of unique in this game because it can't fix everything. It can't fix any of the really strong weapons like the Gradavis, the Parthia, the Mercurius, I think is the name of the one that is unique to Marth. But it can restore warp, which means that with the two warps that are available in the game, they have 7 uses apiece. That's 14 uses. I guess it would be 12 uses because you can only get 6. Once it breaks, it breaks. But when you combine that with the 12 uses from Hammered, we're talking about like 90 warps or something. Maybe it's not that high, but it's a lot of warp uses. You can warp all over the place in this game. As long as Lena is alive, it is extremely powerful. In a lot of these earlier games, in any game where you can warp anywhere on the map that you want, warp skipping is always an option. Warp skipping is usually you warp someone, you kill the boss in one round, and then you warp somebody onto the throne and you seize. You can do that pretty much whenever you want in this game. Fact number 11 is going to be about effective damage. So effective damage and how powerful it is varies from game to game. In this game, the way that effective damage works is it is 3 times the might of the weapon. So like a Rider's Bane, for example, has 5 might. So it has 15 might if it's effective. This is a pretty standard fact. It's 3 times a lot of games, but the reason that I want to bring this up is because the Rider's Bane is kind of unique in this game. Whereas stuff like the Armor Slayer is both effective against Knights and Generals, the Rider's Bane is only effective against Cavaliers, not against Paladins, which makes the Rider's Bane pretty crappy because once you get to the point in the game where you're only fighting Paladins, it doesn't do anything anymore. And it's not effective against like Horsemen, which you fight quite a bit. So the Rider's Bane is a really powerful weapon early on. The 15 might is awesome against Cavaliers, but the fact that it has no effective damage against Paladins is pretty unique to this game and makes it pretty crummy in the end game. Fact number 12 is about magic, and specifically how there's some really strong magic users in this game, and there are some unique tomes in this game that are extremely valuable. So there's 4 different offensive magic units that are recruited in this game, unless you promote clerics, of course. There's Wendell, Boa, Merrick, and Linda. Now, Merrick and Linda both come as mages, and they both have unique tomes. Merrick comes with the Excalibur tome, which has a really high 13 might, only weighs 1, and has 20 crits. Extremely effective at killing bosses. Magic in this game also is not affected by terrain bonuses. The percentage that you get when you use a tome is always a set percentage. So if you have 100% with fire, no matter who you're fighting or what terrain they're on, it's always going to be a 100% hit. Linda comes with the Aura Tome, which has 20 might, which is a lot of might. Linda can one-shot any unit that has 20 or less health throughout the entire game. She's extremely useful at killing ballistas. On the chapter in particular, I believe it's called Wooden Cavalry with a lot of ballistas. She will one-shot every ballista on the chapter. It's extremely useful. And then I just wanted to mention Wendell and Boa. There's no real fact here. They're both just awesome. In Shadow Dragon, Wendell in particular is really useful, but his low magic means that his damage is kind of meh, and then he'll eventually sort of fall off with speed. But the 14 speed that he comes with, along with the low weight of the magic throughout this game, especially fire, that weighs 0, means that he'll pretty much double throughout the entire game, and he's absolutely amazing. Boa, who I believe has 15 speed, is also really useful, although recruited a little bit later. So, yeah, they're both awesome. There's no real fact there, it's opinion, but they're both really amazing units. Fact number 13 is going to be about Manikeets. There are 2 recruitable Manikeets in this game, and specifically about their Dragon Stones. Bantu has a Fire Stone, which is unique to him, and Tiki has a Divine Stone. They are both infinite. In a lot of the other games, like Fa and Mur in the GBA games, they both have a cap on the amount of uses for their Dragon Stone and Divine Stone. I believe in Shadow Dragon, at least the Fire Stone has only a set amount of uses, but in this game, again, they're infinite. It makes Bantu into a pretty darn strong unit because the Fire Stone gives him enough defense to basically just be immortal for a long time in the game. And Tiki is also extremely good because, again, you just get this strong weapon that has no cap on its uses. The fact here, I guess, is that the Dragon Stones are infinite, but mostly I just wanted to talk about how good the Manikeets are in this game because of that. Fact number 14 is going to be about stat boosters and the fact that they do a whole heck of a lot more. Also, we're going to be talking about secret shops a little bit. So I mentioned earlier that the talisman gives plus 7 resistance, which is a lot of resistance. All stat boosters give more than they do in other games. Lock give plus 4. The boots in particular give plus 4. I believe angelic robes give plus 9. So stat boosters are really, really strong. Also, the secret shops in this game. It's pretty unique in games that secret shops allow for stat boosters, especially not in the very, very end game. Fire Emblem 6 in particular is pretty unique for actually allowing the player to buy boots, and you can buy boots in this game along with every single stat booster by the end of the game. Now, the boot shop is really late in the game, but the point is that capping all your units is not that difficult in this game, especially considering just how much money you can get throughout it and just how unnecessary it is to use shops most of the time. Number 15 is about the Fire Emblem, and that is, of course, the name of the game. So every single Fire Emblem game is, of course, called Fire Emblem, but the Fire Emblem doesn't always make an appearance. In fact, I believe this might be the only game, along with Fire Emblem 3, where the Fire Emblem is an actual item in the game. Now, you can't do anything with it. I believe in Shadow Dragon, the Fire Emblem is actually something in your inventory. In this game, it's just sort of an item that Marth gets, and it just allows him to open every chest. So that's what the Fire Emblem does. It is just a master key for all chests. It's kind of weird, but yeah, it's pretty rare that you actually see the Fire Emblem impact in the game, and in this game, Marth gets to use it to open all the chests. For number 16, I want to talk about shops. So I mentioned shopping a little bit earlier, just with the stat boosters and stuff like that. There are shops on almost every single chapter, so I wouldn't really worry too much about buying, like hoarding items, anything along those lines. You also can't send stuff to the convoy by overbuying your inventory like you can in, let's say, Fire Emblem 7, something along those lines. But the big thing here is that you can buy rapiers from almost every single shop. So the rapier is an item or a weapon that is in a lot of different Fire Emblem games. It is unique to Marth. It's usually unique to the Lord. It's not that strong, usually about as strong as an Iron Sword. I think it's almost identical to an Iron Sword in this game, but it has effective damage against any mounted unit or any armor unit, which is really, really strong. And the fact that you can buy extras actually makes Marth a pretty darn useful unit, because he just has this infinite weapon that's effective against what you fight mostly in the end game, which are armors and any kind of cavalry. Fact number 17 is going to go right back to Marth, and this is the fact that he has 3 unique swords in this game. Now, this is only one more than most lords have, because usually you have a unique sword early in the game, and then you get some kind of unique weapon in the end game. But Marth has a 3rd unique sword, and it is what probably should be the sort of S-rank sword for this game. So in most games, there are these sort of divine weapons or holy weapons, whatever you want to call them, which are sort of the end game weapon for a certain class. So in this game, there is the Gradavis and the Parthia, which is the bow and the lance. These have really high weapon levels in order to use them and are really, really powerful. The Mercurius, I think it's called, I'm probably butchering that, but this should be the sort of divine weapon for the swords in this game. And I believe in Shadow Dragon they do make it the S rank weapon. But for some reason in this game it is completely unique to Marth, and it actually increases his growth, which is kind of funny because it's achieved really late, so you probably won't be using it that much. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that he has 3 unique swords in this game. That's pretty rare. The other 2 are, of course, the Rapier, which I mentioned you can buy infinite of, and then the Falchion, which is a pretty important weapon I'll be talking about later. Fact number 18 is going to be about promotion items and what they look like in this game. So in this game, promotion items are class-specific, which is not a completely unique thing in all of Fire Emblem. In the GBA games, for example, there are class-specific promotion items. But the difference is, in the GBA games, every class-specific promotion item has multiple classes that it can promote. For example, a Knight's Crest can promote either a Cavalier or a Knight. A Hero's Crest can promote either a Myrmidon, a Mercenary, or a Fighter. I believe Orion's Bolts Orion's Bolts can even promote Nomads, so there are multiples for that. In From 1, however, each promotion item only corresponds to one class, but a lot of those other classes are still in the game. So for example, a Hero's Crest can promote a Mercenary, but there are fighters in the game that just simply can't promote. A Knight's Crest can promote a Cavalier, but cannot promote a Knight, even though there are Knights in the game. This is where things get really weird. In most of these situations, there just simply isn't a promoted class. So like in the case of a fighter, which I believe is called a warrior, there's no other class. The Knights are really bizarre in this game because there is both a Knight class and a general class, but Knights don't promote into generals, which doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But there are a lot of free promote classes in this game that just simply can't promote. In my playthrough, I was using Caster quite a bit, who is a hunter that you get fairly early in the game. But even though Orion's Bolt is a thing in this game, it can only promote archers, which means you can only ever get your caster to level 20 and then they just stop. Same thing with like fighters, for example, or as I mentioned, knights. I also want to talk about promotion bonuses, or the lack of promotion bonuses. In most other games, when you promote a unit, they get a set amount of bonuses. It's like +2 speed, +1 strength, stuff like that. In this game, however, characters don't get that, but what they do get is the difference between wherever their stats are at and what the base stat is for that class. So for example, if you promote a mercenary and he has 10 speed, but the base for a hero class is 12, he will get that 2 additional speed. This means that I think early promoting is a really, really good idea. Also, you of course just get additional stats with most classes, like additional movement. And you also may get some extra stats if you have lower stats than the base class. Also, as I said, experience doesn't go down once you promote, so it's really, really useful to early promote. Most classes, again, get additional movement. The Mage to Bishop class doesn't get additional movement, but does get the addition of being able to use stabs. The one unique thing in this situation is mercenaries. Mercenaries promote to heroes, but they don't get any additional movement. So if you already have all of the bases for a hero, you may as well just wait until level 20. In fact, you can have a mercenary level 19 at the end of the game, and he'll be just as strong as if you promoted him to a hero, because they both have 7 movement. It's just a little bit weird, and yeah, the promotions in this game, they're a little bit lacking, which is unfortunate, but at least there's some sort of cool classics like the Paladin, like the Sniper, things of that nature. Fact number 19 is going to be about ballistas. So ballistas are, I believe, completely unique to the first game, and then its sequel, which is the first and the third, and then of course was remade in Shadow Dragon. But in this game, they're a little bit weird. In Shadow Dragon, ballistas are really, really strong because they have a ton of range and can be really deadly. But in this game, ballistas are really just like slow archers with really good defense. Yeah, they're kind of odd. They're not very difficult to fight. They do have a lot of defense, which does mean that you're going to have to probably go to some kind of magic. But yeah, the fact that they only have 2 range, they don't even have 1 range. You can attack them straight up just like an archer. They wind up being pretty darn weak, which is kind of weird, at least for me to see, especially in comparison to just how good they are and how scary they can be in Shadow Dragon. Also, I'll just mention this right now, and I mentioned this before, there are no siege tomes in this game. So in Shadow Dragon, there is a siege tome called Swarm that you have to contend with a lot, and these ballistas also have 3 to 10 range, just like a siege tome. In this game, however, ballistas don't have that range, and there are no siege tomes. So again, it makes keeping your weaker units alive quite a bit easier, and it's not as tedious. It doesn't require you, I think, to sort of warp skip as much as Shadow Dragon does, or at least isn't as nice. Fact number 20 is going to be about weapon levels. So in most Fire Emblem games, there are weapon levels. It just makes sense, right? Like a base level unit will usually have a pretty low weapon level, so they can't use a silver sword right off the bat. Makes a lot of sense. In this game, there's something similar, except there is a number that's ascribed to what weapons you can use, as opposed to a letter that you have in those other games. Also, characters have a percent chance to get weapon level just like any other stat, as opposed to other games where it's usually built up by using that weapon quite a bit. This doesn't matter in most situations. I'd say it's pretty easy to use whatever weapon you want as long as you've used your unit, at least for a little while. But the big thing is, it does make bishops and specifically promoted mages by far your best staff users, because clerics really struggle to get any levels, so they're never going to get weapon level ups. Whereas your Merrick, for example, once he becomes a bishop, he doesn't restart at like E and staves. He's able to use all the really good staves because his weapon rank is just going to be really high, and it works for both staves and magic. Fact number 21 is going to be about trading and how you get items from one character to another. Also about the convoy. Now, you have access to your convoy basically at all times. There is no convoy in between chapters, but there is a convoy or sometimes two convoys on every single chapter. So you'll always have access to all of those items. But trading is the really interesting thing in this game. There is no trading like there is in more modern games where you can initiate a trade and then look at both characters' inventories and swap over as much or as little as you want. In this game, if one character does not have all of their slots filled up, you can have another character walk up to them and give them an item. It's a bit tedious, and it's going to require you in a lot of situations to like discard items because you can't trade back and forth, but at least there's some kind of a trading element in this game, which is kind of nice. Fact number 22 is something that is very much carried over to Shadow Dragon. So if you've played that one, which is of course a remake of Fire Emblem 1, you're probably fully aware of this. But I just wanted to talk about something that's kind of interesting with this game, and that is making Starlight and defeating Garnif. So there's a character in this game, an antagonist named Garnif, who you fight fairly early in the game. He shows up for about 7 turns on a chapter, and then goes away. And you cannot deal any damage to him because of the tome that he's using. Later on in the game, we're going to be getting a few different orbs, which I'll be talking about in the next fact, in what they do. But if you bring 2 of them with Marth to a house, you can get Starlight. Starlight is the way to actually fight Garnif, and if you do this, you get the Falchion, which is a really nice item. But you don't have to do this. You can warp skip that chapter. The boss is not Garnif sitting on the throne, so you don't actually have to fight him at all. It's just kind of interesting. You can either go the route of the Falchion or not. I'll talk a little bit about the Falchion later and why it's really useful in this game, as opposed to in Shadow Dragon, where I would almost recommend skipping it. But that is how you get it in this game, and you do have to make Starlight. But not all playthroughs are going to be doing this the same way. Fact 23, as I said, is going to have to do with those orbs that I mentioned. So they are the Light Orb and the Star Orb. There's another orb that you get that you don't have to use to make Starlight. This has 3 uses and deals a set amount of damage to all the enemies, all the units on the chapter. It includes your own. But the specific ones that I want to hone in on are the Light Orb and the Star Orb, and mostly just the Star Orb. The Light Orb completely negates the terrain bonuses of your opponent. If you're struggling with bosses, I guess this can be okay, but this one honestly isn't that useful. What is really useful is the Star Orb, because what the Star Orb does is it makes it so that the weapon that you're using never loses any hits. And I already mentioned how good Excalibur and Aura are. There's also some really strong weapons in this game, like the Gradavis and the Parthia, that have really, really high stats. So it actually brings into question sort of a decision that you have to make. Do you want to get the Falchion, or do you want to just go nuts with a unit with the Gradavis or Merrick with the Excalibur, stuff like that? Again, in Shadow Dragon, I think it's much better to forego the Falchion and use the orbs, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's different in this game later. Whereas in this game, I think it's a little bit better to get the Falchion, but the orbs are really useful, and you actually do have to make a decision on whether you want to keep the orbs or you want to get Starlight. Fact 24 is about a really interesting character in this game, and that is Zane. So Zane is, I believe the class is something like a commando, or I think her class is different depending on like the translation patch and stuff you use. But what Zane does is she can become a full copy of one of your units. This is really unique. This is basically, I can't think of another character in any other Fire Emblem game that can do this, but she can go up to one of your units and again become fully the copy with the same stats, the same HP, all that different stuff. She still does have to use her own weapons, so you do sort of have to equip her with the thing in mind of who you're going to be copying. But Zane is an extremely powerful unit because it basically just means that whoever your strongest unit is, you can just have 2 of them. That's really, really good, and a really unique class for this game. Hey everyone, really quick. Unfortunately, I did not have any footage of the Pegasus Triangle attack that I'm about to talk about from this game because my Sheeta died and I'd never triangle attacked. So instead, I'm just going to show some footage of some triangle attacks I did in my Fire Emblem 6 playthrough. They're some of my favorites, and we're just going to talk about the triangle attack from Fire Emblem 1. I have 3 different related armor knights who can all triangle attack with each other. It originates from this game. It does exist in this game with the 3 different Pegasus Knights. One of the interesting things about the triangle attack is that, while I mentioned before that Starlight is the only way to get through Garnif's tome and actually defeat him, apparently, and I have not tested this myself because unfortunately Sheeta died in my playthrough, you can triangle attack Garnif even if he has that magic and it will deal damage, which is kind of fun. Fact number 26 is going to be about the divine weapons that I mentioned earlier. So this is the Gradavis, which is the lance, the Mercurius, which is the sword, can only be used by Marth, and the Parthia, which is the bow. And specifically the fact that these can be used to heal yourself, which is just kind of weird. Usually you can't use weapons in this capacity, but for some reason I guess they didn't think that just giving them insane stats, and in the Gradavis' case, the ability of 1-2 range was good enough, so they can actually heal the user. This reminds me a little bit of Leaf in Thracia, who can heal himself with his light brand. It's just kind of weird. Probably won't come up, but kind of funny that the divine weapons can heal the user. Fact 27 is going to be about Camus, and there really is no fact here, I guess it's just my opinion, but holy crap is Camus a scary ass boss. So most bosses in this game, especially in the end game, get pretty darn easy. In fact, most of the bosses after Camus they just give javelins to, which are just really weak. Medius, the final boss, is also pretty tough, but wow, Camus is an absolute beast. Not only does he have pretty much the strongest stats in this game, other than Medius, but he's also using the Gradavis, which you get when you kill him, which is really scary. I mentioned earlier that there is crit in this game and no way to avoid it, so it's going to be really difficult for you to have a unit that can actually take a Gradavis hit crit from Camus. He's also really fast. Yeah, I don't know. Again, no fact here, just Camus is really tough, and it's just funny to me that they slapped this boss like 5+ chapters before the end of the game, and then like every boss after this just has a javelin and is basically a pushover. Fact number 28 is going to be about the Divine Stone, which is the stone that Tiki comes with, and it is completely unique to her. But this fact is going to be a little bit different than every other fact I've given thus far and the couple of facts that I have coming up, because this fact isn't about the game itself, more about the resources that tell you stats about the game. So most resources that you use, like Fire Emblem WD, Serenus Forest, the Fire Emblem Wiki, stuff like that, have pretty accurate information when it comes to this game, which is really nice. I mean, this game is really old, and of course it was only released in Japan. But the Divine Stone is wrong on pretty much every website that I've found. The first thing is that the Divine Stone does not give plus 15 defense like most of these websites claim. It gives plus 13 defense, which can be a big deal, especially if you're counting on that plus 15 defense. But if you dig hard enough, you will find some resources that say plus 13, so I'm pretty sure that is the accurate number. The weight, on the other hand, is something that I've never been able to find an answer to. Every single resource I've ever looked at says that the Divine Stone weighs 1, and yet, if that's the case, my Tiki should not have gotten doubled in multiple different situations. I actually have a video on my channel showcasing a Bishop with Thunder and 16 speed, so 15 speed after getting weighed down by 1 by the Thunder, and neither him nor Tiki double each other, meaning that their speeds are exactly the same. So the conclusion that I've come to is that the Divine Stone gives plus 13 defense, not plus 15, and weighs 5, not 1. There are also some other things in this game. I believe the Mage Stone is incorrect on how much defense that gives on some of these different resources. So obviously, these resources are not going to be perfect. And I only tested this a little bit, so there could be some variable that I'm not accounting for. But this is the one thing that is not just about the gameplay and is about a lot of these resources having incorrect stats on the Divine Stone. Fact number 29 is going to be about the Falchion and effective damage against Medius. So I mentioned that keeping the Store Orb in Shadow Dragon makes a lot of sense, and part of this is because the Divine Stone is effective against all Manicheets, including Medius. So characters like Nagi or Tiki can be really good at taking out Medius. In this game, however, this is not the case. Divine Stones are effective against Manakeths, but not Medius specifically. You're really supposed to fight Medius with the Falchion, so getting it is a lot better in this game than it is in Shadow Dragon. Again, my recommendation, and this isn't a fact, but this is my opinion, is that you should get the Falchion in this game, and you shouldn't get the Falchion in Shadow Dragon, unless, again, you have a really strong Marth there, I guess, and you want to kill the final boss with Marth. But there isn't much of an option in this game for killing Medius effectively. Fact number 30 is about the Alm Staff, which is the name of a staff that you get very late in the game, on chapter 24, along with Elise. And I believe Elise is the only unit in the game that can use the Alm Staff. Now, the reason that the Alm Staff is unique is because it can revive one of your dead comrades, one of your dead teammates, which is pretty rare in Fire Emblem. There are a few times where you can revive dead units. Fire Emblem 4 in particular, I think, has a way to revive. And you can even repair that one. This is just a one-use thing. In the remake of this game, you actually get the Alm Staff from the chest that I've put a circle around, or it's actually just above that. In this game, what you have to do is take Elise to that blue pillar or whatever it is that I've circled very nicely in that red ink. And then she can use the Alm Staff and you can revive anyone. Now, unfortunately, the reason that I'm showing you an image and not a video of me doing this is because I really did not understand how this worked when I was playing the game. Again, in the remake of this game, you get the Alm Staff here, and then you can use it either at the end of this chapter or on the next chapter. And my plan was to use it in the next chapter, because by doing that, you sort of get to bring an extra unit, because you deploy, let's say, 15 units, and you sort of get a 16th because you revive somebody there. In this game, you have to do it in that one specific spot, which means you can only do it on this chapter. And again, you can only do that on that one specific spot. But it's pretty unique. Again, it's pretty rare that you actually get to revive fallen teammates. So that's pretty cool. And finally, we have fact number 31, which I know sort of goes against what I said at the beginning of this video when I said 30 facts. But I did wind up, I wanted to sneak one more fact in here at the very end, just about Medius and just how tough he is as a final boss. I know I mentioned a little bit about him and how to take him down when we talked about the Falchion and just how important that is. And I want to talk about two things with Medius, two stats or abilities that he has that really make it difficult, and that's why the Falchion is as useful as it is. So number one, I'm just going to mention this again very briefly. The only thing that's effective against Medius is the Falchion. And this is really important because Medius has 35 defense. He has 12 base defense along with plus 23 from the Earthstone, which means if you're not dealing the 30 might of effective damage that the Falchion has, the next best that you can get is, I guess, the Gradavis, which has 20 might. That is pretty good, and you can be dealing a little bit of damage with that, especially with a capped strength unit. But again, very difficult. At the most, you're dealing like 5 damage at that point. The other thing that's really important with Medius is that he can't be attacked at range. This is really important because a pretty obvious way to kill him would be to just poke him to death with mages. That's a pretty good strategy for most enemies and most bosses in this game. I believe in the remake, he does get 1-2 range, but I think you can hit him at range. So that's kind of the way that they offset that. So you can absolutely use magic here like Aura or Excalibur, and they are going to work pretty effectively, but he can't be attacked at range, which makes this quite a bit more difficult. So yeah, Medius is a pretty darn difficult boss. If you train Marth, in my situation, like I said before, I missed the secret shops, so I didn't get to sort of stat boost the crap out of Marth. I just gave him the ones that I got. If you get Marth to cap 20 everything, this boss is pretty easy, especially with the warps in this game. But if you don't do that, it's pretty difficult to find a way to kill the final boss of this game, given his really high defense. And thus concludes the 31 of the most interesting facts that I could think of regarding Fire Emblem 1. Now, obviously, as I said at the top of this video, these are not the only facts of the game. I could go rambling on and on. In fact, even though I took a while to brainstorm this, when I was making the video, I thought about a bunch more stuff, but I didn't want to make it too cumbersome. I think this video is already going to be pretty long. But yeah, if you want to add anything in the comments, if you want to correct me, because I'm sure some of the stuff that I mentioned here isn't fully correct. So if you want to correct me, if you want to add stuff of your own, absolutely feel free. This is just sort of a fun video. I just wanted to sort of get some stuff off my chest about the game, because again, I don't think a ton of people have experienced this game, and there are some very unique things to it. So yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, I want to thank you very much for sticking with me. I really hope that you had a good time watching the video. One last thing, as I said, the reason that I played Fire Emblem 1 was because I'm doing this Iron Man of all the Fire Emblem games. So we're going to be moving on to Gaiden next. I'm also going to be having a tier list. Actually, I think the tier list came out yesterday. So if you want to check out a tier list, which also isn't very comprehensive because I've only played the game once, but I just sort of talk about my take in the game and the units, feel free to do that. And I think I'll probably do these kinds of videos every time we complete a game. But yeah, we'll keep going with that series. Probably the day after this comes out, I think we'll start our guide and playthrough. So yeah, again, thanks everybody for watching. I had a lot of fun making this. I had a lot of fun playing the game, and I'll see you next time.